Hi, so it's me again. I put so much thought into crafting these comments and trying to edit myself, the proper punctuation, proper grammar, and all I get is some like little snarky, like stupid comment that any fifth grader could, if they're 35 years old and still in the fifth grade, they'd probably be saying that to me. I'm really, all I have to say is the grievance grifters. I'm not going to send you a coffee because you just complain all the time. I have ministries that I subscribe to. You act like, oh, I'm always so insulted, I'm always so offended, and everything like that. And it's okay as far as it goes, but the fact is, I think you only pay attention to the subscribers that, quote unquote, buy you a coffee. I don't owe you a coffee, bro. I mean, I could be your mother. I mean, really, it's like, I could tell you a thing or two about people from Africa. Most of them are very hardworking, nice people, but I encountered some people that weren't very nice when I was a teenager, and unfortunately, it kind of changed the trajectory of my life. So you can be all proud of, I don't know, being some sort of an Oreo, whatever, it's like you can be all proud about it, but at the end of the day, is your wife white enough for you? I bet you your wife is white. I bet you donuts to dollars she's white. Well, that's none of your business. I would have married a black person if I had had the opportunity, but unfortunately, my father in particular was too racist to allow that. And the guy was Christian and everything, but at the same time, in retrospect, I was a teenager at the time, and this man was almost 30 years old. And they had brought him into a Christian college where he was free to roam about and choose anybody he wanted, and he chose me. And because he was so persistent, I said, okay, yeah, So I understand, this was abuse. I was preyed upon, actually, it's true. So, a little bit less of the arrogance. Why don't you just get a real job, like a CDL license or something like that, instead of like, I'm so talented, I can make these videos and sound so articulate. I mean, we're humoring you. You don't really sound that intelligent. You sound a little bit stupid. But we humor you. Because, we see your passion, and we get your drift. You know what I'm saying, man? You weren't even born when I was 10 years old. You had not even... Your parents were not old enough to procreate you. So please... Oh, I just get so upset. I do. I really do. I really don't enjoy watching these videos where black people are putting down black people. My mother was white, and she did teach in inner city schools, and she taught at juvenile detention facilities. But the last job that she had, she said, my mom was like the least racist person in the world. And that's why my dad really had a problem with her, because he was like, I can't believe you. You're too nice. Like, I took a page from my mom's playbook. I always try to be really super duper nice. And my dad hated her for it. I mean, he really did. But one of the things she said to me when she was still employed as a teacher in inner city schools, she said, black people, they're just mostly evil. And so my mother always got me jobs, which is always a big mistake because What would that be? Enmeshment? Where I never applied for a job myself. Mother always had to do it for me. She got me a job at a place where the girls were basically just prostitutes with a part-time job, working. They're all white girls, so please. Prostitutes with a part-time job. That's a really good way to describe it. Sometimes we have to thank God. We're a little bit pudgy. Maybe we're not as pretty as, we're not the ideal person, or we just don't look easy, you know what I'm saying? For some reason, I never got into any kind of escapades when I was working as a teenager at this facility, which would be called a place that served hamburgers and hot dogs. Now it's a Taco Bell. Yeah. We'll just put it that way. I'm not saying that everybody there was bad, but it was just not the best scene for anybody. But then I decided I'm going to go to a Christian college because people in my small town, they're not Christian enough, even though we're surrounded by Amish people. Well, I had a friend who said she dated Amish men, so I don't know what she meant by dated, but, fill in the blanks. I'm not really sure. With the room spring and everything. The love of money is the root of all evil. They're not they got bored, They just can't evangelize. They won't have anything to do with English. The Amish would call Americans English. So, but they just create all these new businesses, and there's just money. See, the love of money is the root of all evil. You just have focus so much on, being ourselves, and, there is a problem with the fact that, there's inbreeding and things like that and genetic diseases. I see it, but it's it's not my problem. Certainly, my husband was never from, I don't know where he came from. It didn't matter. He really seemed to like me, so I liked him, and I don't think we're genetically very closely related at all. So you can see the genetic variation in our offspring. If I sound like a mean person, I'm a little bit sad. I actually am a little bit sad. I will give more grace to people that are just from a foreign country, even though I know that they're bad and they're evil and they're grasping and they're covetous. I have more of a tendency to judge my fellow American, because I know that my fellow American, I heard people complain about the Vietnam War, the Vietnam. Well, my dad was too old to go into the Vietnam War, so he never complained about America. And his parents were not from America, by the way. In fact, he had to get a security clearance just to work in the federal government because his parents were from a foreign country. My dad, in his own way, he loved America, but he also had a soft spot in his heart for the old country. Now, my brother, unfortunately, his good looks and his success and his social, what shall we say, success. I know I'm repeating myself. I hate to sound redundant. That's just a terrible thing. His social mobility seemed to have led to his downfall. Because when you contrast me with my brother, he was everything that I was not. He was younger, obviously. He was skinny. He never was fat in his life. He never had a fat period. I never even saw him get a pimple. He used to make fun of me when I still lived at home. and we would shoot baskets, and he's like, oh, you have pimples on your face. Ha ha ha. Thanks, 12-year-old little jerk. Thanks a lot, He was very handsome. He was able to get very good dental work performed on his teeth. He had these beautiful white teeth. He had these beautiful steel blue eyes and this blonde hair. And obviously he was of the male gender, so obviously he had something else that I didn't have. We're not going to be too graphic. I never, my dad would talk about this. My dad was just a little bit too obsessed with Sigmund Freud. He would talk about, can I say it? P envy. But, what Freud, the real term from Freud was penis envy. I never wanted to be a man. What I really wanted was, I had boob envy. Because I saw Dolly Parton, I saw people with really big boobs, and I'm like, why can't I have really big boobs? That's not fair. Why can't I have gleaming white teeth? Why can't I have a round posterior? It's called, I don't know what it's called, but I never, ever, ever, ever wanted to have the organ of the opposite sex at all. I wanted love, I wanted admiration. But as a woman, don't you think you're sort of fighting an uphill battle? My mother always had this idea that she wanted to be pretty and petite and feminine, but she's a tall lady. She's strong, she's tall, she's good at math. And she so much wanted to impress her own father that she really delved into the study of mathematics. My father was not that smart, so it's like, if you're good at math, that, he had books about Edward Teller, like theoretical physicists. It rubbed off on my brother so far as he really did a good job of learning math and things like that. Listen, my mother was a math teacher. She could have drilled math facts into me. I remember when I was in the 3rd grade. So that means it's nothing to do with the Freemasons, please. So I'm just going to disabuse you of that notion that I was into Freemasonry. Of course not. I was just a little girl. I didn't know anything about Freemasons. I don't think my parents, either of them, were associated with. Well, I think my mother might have been a little bit intimately associated with one of them, but yeah, that's the person that I have. A little bit of yeah. It's really shameful what you did to my family. How you basically destroyed our nuclear family with your lust and your Freemasonry. Of course, you can't back up any of that evidence. Well, but anyway, that's right. And what was I saying? My brother, I don't know, like if he had autism, similar to me. I remember when I used to have to babysit him after my parents' divorce. Now, as I was saying, when I was in the 3rd grade, the 3rd grade means I was like maybe 7 years old. I'm just approximating the age that I was back then. So I had a really wonderful teacher with a huge, beautiful white smile and glasses, just very encouraging and very positive. I didn't know my math facts. I didn't know my times tables. I still don't know the 12s. Because we want to talk about arrested development. My intellectual development was interfered with several times. My social, not psycho in terms of like killing people. Please, folks, I'm talking about psychosocial development. If you are an atheist, then you can, at least I will use terms that you can understand. It was really interrupted so many times, even when I was a little girl. It's like, well, you made friends with this person. I'm taking you to a different babysitter. And it has, I have just put the puzzle pieces together. I think that my mother was afraid that I was getting too attached to the babysitter, that I would love the babysitter more than I loved her. And so just as I was becoming comfortable with somebody, a caregiver, my mother would just yank me away. It's like, oh no, time to go to a new babysitter. There was one babysitter who was actually kind of mean. It's like, you left me there too long, Mommy. Because that babysitter was just kind of like hell on jet skis. She was just such a mean person. I wanted to be friends with her daughter, but I think that babysitter had insecurity issues. She thought that if I befriended her daughter, that I would replace her in her daughter's life. Don't go to a bunch of different babysitters. I don't know, I'm coming up with percentages. 75% of my babysitters were very nice people and very good people. A few of them were a little bit sketchy. Nobody was ever, well, there was that one babysitter, we shan't name the name. Maybe they were into something really dark. But again, I'm not permitted to name names when it comes to something really dark. For example, they had this pet dog, and even when I wasn't being babysat by this neighbor, the dog would just come and, stalk me like Cujo. Remember Cujo, Stephen King's Cujo? You have no idea what it was like before we had leash laws and we had invisible fences. Like, this dog terrorized me for, I don't know how many, maybe 18 months. It seemed like an eternity. This dog, it just, I had pet dogs. I was so sad. So really, I'm really upset. I'm really upset that you would make a comment without listening to any of my messages. Well, if you were a handsome person with blonde hair, or you were black, or I choose not to show my face. I just don't. My father, years ago when I had put on some weight, in high school, and somehow I gained success in theater and even in college, he said, Helen Hayes was not a good-looking person, but she was very successful in the theater. Maybe you should be the next Helen Hayes. I'm like, thanks, Dad. You think I'm pudgy and ugly. Thanks so much. That's just what you want to hear from your dad. On the outside, I know my relatives were envious because my parents would always praise me, like, Erica, she's just so intelligent. Oh, this girl is so intelligent. And she's just so talented. That's the outside child, dear. So, why, it cuts me to the quick. I feel as if a dagger is being pushed through the middle of my heart, that you would be mean to me when I am. You've had all the privileges in life. You're young. Obviously, you have this beautiful white wife, and you can afford to just spend most of your day just making YouTube videos, asking people to buy you some coffee. To me, I'm getting. I dropped Candace Owens last year. I dropped Tucker Carlson last year. I dropped Megyn Kelly, because once they started insulting the Jews. See, That's not in my wheelhouse because that's a very sensitive issue for me. I grew up in an era when we could see. It was very traumatizing when I was in high school, still just a teenager. And when I left high school, I was still only 17 years old. To see photographs that the Americans took from Auschwitz, the bodies piled up, and the people who were still alive, they were basically skeletonized human beings. And, nobody who sees that could ever say, I'm sorry. I only care because I'm Jewish. When you hear about how they put people, dead people, oh my God. Oh my God. I told them, you're going to get a shower. After months of not being able to shower, they put them in the gas chambers. Oh my God. So, I was an October baby. So. I can't believe how brainwashed people are that they didn't realize what an atrocity October 7th was. Even people my age or a little bit older. I try to call my cousin. She's a little bit, I can't remember if she's younger or older. I have like a couple of cousins. I tried to talk to them about this. I said, I am just so traumatized that this has happened. And one of them came back with a very smart reply. Listen, I'm getting it from both sides. I really don't care anymore. I'm done with you. Hang up, click. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. Well, she married, my mom said, oh, she married somebody from Spain. No, she didn't marry somebody from Spain. You nitwit. She married a Muslim, He hates the Jews. Oh. And she's upset at me. Folks, the reason why I don't have tons of friends and relatives calling me up is because I seem to be, what would you say? A person who doesn't have wealth. Well, I have wealth of spirit. Have I been arrested 57 times for prostitution? No, only by the grace of God have I not been arrested 57 times for prostitution. It's like, Mother, why in the world did you just jerk me out of your womb early, which, I had to have, we had to have this induction because the doctor was going to have a golf vacation in October. Nobody goes golfing in October. My mother just wanted to get it over with. She was tired of being pregnant. And so I was born a little bit too early, and I don't think that my brain had developed properly. But she would continue this pattern throughout my childhood, my adolescence, even, dare I say, into my adulthood. Never, people who are close to their mothers, oh, I love you so much, girl, I'll never. What could I have done so terribly that my mother wouldn't love me? I looked at pictures of myself when I was a baby. Oh, I was such a pretty, I had beautiful eyes, beautiful big brown eyes, and they were very symmetrical, and I looked like I was just the most pleasant infant in the world, and even when I was a little girl. But something changed with our relationship over the years. And that's the thing. I feel as if my mother became envious of me because my dad started to love, he was sort of infatuated, not in a sexual way, please forgive me, Lord, if I've given the wrong impression. I really don't think there was anything going on untoward in terms of that with me and my dad. And forgive me, God, I don't know why I said that. It was in a moment of stupidity. I'm clearing my dad's name. He never did anything like that to me. As far as I know, he never did anything wrong. It is my understanding that my mother became gradually envious of me, and I loved her like a little girl would love her pet cat or a pet dog, or you would cling to that creature, because I didn't have any siblings at the time. I loved my mother. I thought that my mother was a goddess, actually. Like, if the sun rose, I thought, that's my mother up there in the sky. That's how much I loved her. However, the economic pressures of the 1970s during the Carter era. Why do you want to bring up Jimmy Carter? Well, could have been the pre-Carter era. I'm not remembering everything particularly accurately, but I'm telling you, I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can. Squeaky voice and all. I had a terrible dream when I was just a little girl. I might have been 4 or 5 years old. That my mother used to take me to this grocery store. It was in Worcester and Millersburg, Ohio. And there's plenty of Amish people floating around, so they can back me up on this. No, it was your dream. How can the Amish people... I know, but Worcester and Millersburg, Ohio, right? Come on, that's kind of like an Amish Mecca. It's definitely more of a Mecca. It's like old school Amish people. You would see people arriving in horse and buggy carriages, and they would come in, they would shop, and they'd be wearing black clothing and everything like that. I had this horrible nightmare that I was, you know how nightmares go, like, I'm naked. And I wasn't naked, but I was wearing a shorty nightie, which seems a little weird because my mother had purchased a shorty nightie for me. That was a thing back in the 1970s. Like, basically you're just wearing like little Shirley Temple bottoms, and a shorty nightie is you're exposing your thighs entirely to everybody, including God, and God is looking away. It's like, I don't want to see a little girl's thighs. That seems a little bit... You're over-sexualizing a toddler, So, yeah, the shorty nightie, I remember that. Like, my mom had bought me at least 2 shorty nighties. You remember that from the 1970s. I tell no lies. You know that? But in my nightmare, my mother was at the checkout counter, and they had like a conveyor belt back in the mid-1970s, and it just would churn and churn and churn. And it was my dream. I was standing there in my short nightgown, and my mother was checking things out, and I was just standing behind her, hoping she would pay attention to me, and she just totally failed to recognize me. And I woke up. If I didn't wake up screaming, I must have woken up in a cold sweat. It's like, this was prophetic for you, Erica. This is how your mother is going to start ignoring you. In fact, I guess maybe the Holy Spirit was warning me. My mother would just cease to have any sentimentality or affection toward me. Like, what, but mother, but of course she would lavish affection on dogs and cats, but not on her daughter. No, not on you, Nellie. There was something that I did, something I did wrong, and then she just decided, I'm not, spending my social capital on this girl. But mother, I'm your only child. Well, yeah, whatever. Because of, oh yes, let's be honest, capitalism. The bottom dollar. So anytime people start, talking about how great capitalism is and communism is and everything like that, it's a nice dream, and I'm so sorry that we are, as a Western society, polluted by filthy lucre. Filthy lucre. Lucre, which would be Italian lucre. But why should I feel sorry for myself? At least I'm still alive. Look at my beautiful brother. Look at him. Look at him. He was a singer in a band. That was his first mistake, becoming a singer in a band. He should have been in a church choir. A lot of people are in church choirs. I would love to do worship music. I would love, and my brother actually helped me one time when he was still alive. He was very good in the studio, manipulating, using the technology to make my voice sound good. Really shortly before he died. He didn't believe it, and, shortly before he died, a few months later, I said, John, I've written a new song. Could you please help me with this song? He's like, I'm really busy right now. Don't bother me. And then he's dead. We find out he's dead. Oh my God. Folks, may I reiterate, my brother had all the advantages. He had good looks. He had charm. He had the Aryan look, with the blonde hair and the blue eyes. He was skinny. He was never fat in his life. He was male. He was tall. He was engaging. He was good looking. There's nothing against him. And yet, look what happened. Look what happened. How his life ended. I think, I have to be quite honest with you. I have really probably disposed of most of his CDs because they seem a little bit satanic. It's like I got into this phase where it's like, well, you have to throw anything away that's cursed. I burned, I threw away things. If he were able to say, he'd say, Erica, I'm right here. I'm sorry. I rejected Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Do you think God will give me a second chance? I said, yes. Oh, flooding back those memories. That kid, I know he could be annoying. He mocked me for having acne. And we got into our little spats, Maybe he called me fat a few times, which is fine, It's probably true I was. That kid never did any serious thing wrong. God. So, instead of talking about my father on Father's Day, I'd like to talk about my brother because he might have been a wonderful father. If only he had had the opportunity. Praise the Lord.